Coming straight out of Ecamm. This is a jam with the Ecamm fam. Ecamm fam is the name of the jam. This is a jam with the Ecamm fam. Ecamm fam is the name of the jam. This is a jam with the Ecamm fam. It's a jam with the Ecamm fam. This is a jam with the Ecamm fam. Ecamm fam is the name of the jam.
Hold it, stop the music!
Ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen.
Can I please have your attention?
Now it's showtime. Are you ready? Are you ready for start time?
Let's find out. Ready? Let's go.
It's me, everybody. How you doing? I am so happy to be here. My name is Jeremy Hubble, and I am going to be your instructor today for Ecamm. If you're just getting started with Ecamm, and we'll know how many of you are out there that have used it or haven't used it, please participate in the poll that Mr. Moderator Paul Duncan has going right now. And we'll get a chance to see who's new, who's not new. If this is going to be a family hangout, the Ecamm fam is a great group of people to hang out with. And so we'll just kind of take it as it goes. But of course, we're going to go through the normal things that are part and parcel with any time you're running Ecamm, regardless of your user experience level. So today we're going to start by just creating a scene, and we'll create a scene that has elements in it, overlays and whatnot, just so you can see how easy it is to use Ecamm. So, hey, Val. You're welcome, Louis. Oh, I caught some stuff for the way that I posed for my picture, and so I figured I'd start that way. But anyway, let's go ahead and get rolling here. So I'm gonna create a new scene. Oh, where'd I go? Oh, I am right here. So how did I do that? Let's go into live demo mode. So here I am in live demo mode, and I don't need my Apple account in here, so I'll get rid of that. All right, and so now what I've got essentially is a camera overlay inside of my scene window here. And this is super easy to do. How did I do that? Well, let me go ahead and delete it, and I'll show you. So you see down here in the camera switcher, I've got myself, I've got a overhead view. Look at that crown, jeez. And then I've got a bunch of other camera objects here. I've got my Osmo here and a few other knickknack items. And so what I want to do is just click on my face here and drag it into the screen. Right? And now using the scroll wheel on my mouse, I can just set whatever I want as far as the scale of that particular camera view. And it's really simple to do. And so right now it's set to default. It's set by to widescreen. And if I click on the little pencil icon next to the camera overlay, you'll see this is my source. Let me move this over just a tad. There you go. So you can see things. You see I've got my source and the shape and border and a bunch of other options. You have all these different things that you can do that actually allow you to control the way that this camera is presented. So for instance, like say if I wanted to go to square, I could do that. Or if I wanted to go to circle, I could select that. And it will keep more or less, so I can kind of position myself, but if I don't like where I am, I can move my camera around inside the Ecamm interface, and I'll get to that in a little bit. If I have, for instance, right now, the border is set to motion. So if you notice just ever so subtly that the colors around my, the outline here are kind of shifting. They're rotating around. Actually, they're going this way. I got to do everything in reverse. And this is how you get things, kind of moving in Ecamm, so to speak, with the motion option. You can set the border width. So if I wanted it like that, I could do that. That's a little extreme, or you can have it, kind of hairline if you want to. Choice is yours, but you've got that option. So let me go back to wide here, and you'll notice that another option appears here. And you see there's these little, is like Foursquare set up here. And that allows you to set the corner radius on all or none of the edges, the corners of this particular camera overlay. So for instance, if I wanted to do that, notice now I've got two corners, two right angles, and then I've got two rounded edges. And it's pretty cool to do it that way. So this gives you some style options. Your opacity, I don't normally play around with opacity, to be honest with you. It's just, for the camera overlay, that's where I don't play around with opacity that much, because this just does that, so I mean, you're either on screen or you're not. I mean, I guess you could do partially on screen if you wanted to, but there's lots of ways to do this. You could rotate, feeling upside down. I'm in Australia today, right? The perspective one's kind of cool too. Let me I'm gonna zoom out here, and I will go back. I'm gonna change this to let's see, we'll go shape and then go to, let's do tall. Oh, okay. So this is, if you're going to something like, if this is something like, let me zoom out. There we go. That's better. Instagram, for instance, this is the perfect aspect ratio when you're setting it to tall. But what I could do here is that I could hold down the option key, click in the center of the overlay, and then just drag. And now I've got a copy. And then there's two of me. And then I can go in and select this. And I did this for one of the shows that I have, I have me and my cousin do it. We host a show together. And I tried to play around with the perspective to make it look like we were looking at each other. So I would do something like this, and then I click on the other one and then change its perspective. And it's cool, but it didn't quite work out the way that I wanted it to, because we were still looking in the camera like this, and the perspective, if we were looking off like this and he was looking in the opposite direction, it would make sense. But then it's like face off, and then we're not looking at the camera, and so perspective has, you can use this on almost any overlay. For me, for camera overlay, it was a fun little thing to do, but I ended up not going that way. And so you can see here, if I right click on that overlay, I can say reset perspective, and then that changes it back. I'm gonna get rid of this guy here, and then I'll right click here. So how am I doing this? First of all, I'm in an empty scene. Now, basically what happens is a scene is essentially like a container. And, like you go to the stores that have containers, we'll call it that, and they have containers within containers, right? So the overlays are those containers that go within the larger containers. And so the camera overlay sits in a scene, and all the other overlays sit inside a scene. I've seen it compared to something like a house and rooms and then furniture. And that is perfectly a great analogy for it. Lots of ways you can think about this, but essentially a scene encompasses everything, all these overlays, everything that you see. It's kind of like slides in Keynote or slides in PowerPoint, where you have all the objects. Each scene is a slide. It's that simple. So I've got this new scene and I've got me in it, and I'm going to reduce myself a little bit. What's the opposite of embiggen? I don't know. We'll we'll figure that one out. Somebody come up with a witty comment about that. Unembiggen? I don't know. Anyway, so when you're playing around with overlays inside of the scene, you've got a ton of different ones that you can use. You have here, if I go over to the overlays section here inside of Ecamm, you've got image overlays, you've got animated overlays. Of course, you can share screens from other things, and I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. You can put in text, and then you can do a text box even. Unembiggen, de-embiggen. We'll roll with one of those. Somebody needs to come up with a shirt for Creator Camp, which I'll be talking about in a little bit towards the end of the show. And then we've got shape overlays. We have a countdown timer, which you saw at the beginning of this. Let me get rid of this shape because it's driving me crazy. I am wider than the tall. So let's just go to, there we go. That's better. Sorry, that's the Louisiana. And if you didn't know already, I'm from Louisiana. Although I live in Seattle now, we're coming to you from the Northwestern Command of Ecamm in the Pacific Northwest. So, you can see I've got over here, I've got my Saints helmet back there, and I've got some art from Louisiana. And I like to eat. So we'll leave it at that. We'll go ahead and zoom out a little bit here, and I'm going to zoom my picture out so we can add some additional overlays. And you'll see if we go over to this section here, the camera overlays. Now, camera overlays, this is something that's pointed out continuously during all the Ecamm demos that you see, is that Ecamm, because it runs on a Mac, it is built around drag and drop, right? So in my particular case here, like for instance, if I wanted another camera view, I could click on this camera icon and create a new overlay, or I could simply go to the camera switcher down here and drag that in, and now I've got another camera. And you see it takes the same style from the other camera that I already placed in the scene. That's just the way it works. So you can just easily create more and more and more, right? Get rid of that guy. And so all of these happen to work this way. But in the case of when you're creating something entirely new, like a shape, you'll see it also retains the properties of the last time a shape was created. Excuse me a second. I'm going to take a little drink of water. Cotton mouth. There we go. Okay. So you see that this is, believe it or not, this is a square shape or a rectangle. And you can see you got rectangle, square, circle, or squircle. These are shapes that you can place inside of Ecamm. So if you're creating a scene, let's say, for instance, you wanted to have some people's comments, right, inside of this rectangle, and so you're up in the camera view, and then you've got your comments down here in the screen. I'm gonna right click on my camera overlay and then bring that to the front, and that allows me to just snap it up top there. And so now I've got my comments down below, and I'll turn on a little drop shadow there, right? And now what I can do is if I want to put my user comments in here, and I believe, let's go ahead and we'll put up our comments. So let's see here. I have this here, right? And if I wanted those to be a certain size or appear inside of here, I could do something like that. You could put quotes around it. There's lots of different things. In Ecamm, I have it set right now. It disappears after 15 seconds of being on the screen. it's a quick way to lay out a scene. If you want something that is includes other elements, you can certainly do that as well. Let me demonstrate here. We'll go ahead and I'm going to set this to. So another thing you can do with the Option key, in addition to copying, is you can hold down the Option key and then just simply crop your overlay to exactly the size that you want. And this is really useful because you can go with shapes that are not built-in shapes. So you just hold down that Option key. And then if you click, like I said before, if you click in the center and hold down the Option key, it'll create a copy for you. So let's go back to doing the shapes here. Let's say I wanted to put the Ecamm logo inside of here. And I wanted to kind of intersect these shapes. I could create another shape. I'm going to change this to a circle because the Ecamm logo is a circle. See right there, Ecamm, right? And so now I've got it bisecting the entire scene. Now, how do you know? Let me move my camera effects window real quick. So one of the things that I like to show people is like, how do you center things up? How do you know where screen center is? And it's really simple. You look up here at where this monitor icon is, and dead center in that monitor is the center of your scene, right? So if I move this guy over, you see how it snaps right there? You see that blue line and it goes right through the monitor? That is screen center right there, which means that my two overlays are actually a little bit off. So this gives me a way to figure out very quickly how things are set up on my screen. You can also put in, like if you want a grid, you can put in a simple transparent PNG that just has the grid, and you can overlay that and you can lay out everything on using the grid as a helper. As a matter of fact, I believe that we have one in here. Yeah, we do. So you see that grid in the back there. That grid allows us to, kind of see where everything is. And you can do all kinds of grids. I mean, find your favorite illustration program and create a grid with the proper spacing, and you're good to go. Oh, we need our background. We don't need the grid. There we go. So, all right, Ecamm logo. How's that going to work? Well, let me get my border width here. There we go. And I have some stock footage, stock images. I've got this one, right? So I'm going to roll with this. I'm going to put this, just drag and drop from the Finder directly in. And then using the scroll wheel on my mouse, I'll just size it down. And then center it up. But it stopped. What does that mean? What happened there? Well, if you mouse over that animation, which is just a simple transparent background animation, you'll notice that there's the play icon and then there's a slider that allows you to slide that animation. But if I click on the little down arrow, you'll see here when it's finished, do nothing. You can hide it, or you can just set it to loop. And now if I click play, this thing's going to be going on and on and on and on and on. And the other thing is, I was actually playing around with this a little bit last night. I thought, oh, well, maybe I can show them, just create another circle and have the imagine, the create, repeat, imagine text be overlaid and then just have the purple in the center. And I thought, well, you know what? We might be able to do this a little bit more simply. And if I go to the circle now, see, I can mouse over all of my different windows here and have the controls pop up. But I can also, if for instance, if this overlay of the animation is taking over the back, what's behind it, then I can't get to it as easily. So one of the ways to do that is you go over to the overlays panel here, and then you can simply click the little gear icon right? And now I can just set that border width. And look at that. Now I've got the text inside of a what would be an overlay, right? And now it's just a single overlay. It's the circle shape, and then it's the animation on top of that. And it's super easy to do. I mean, you're just adjusting the border size at that point. If you wanted to play around with other things, you could absolutely do that. You could have any kind of shape objects, because of the way that shapes are now blended in Ecamm. You can have just standard like Photoshop. And I don't know about you guys, if you've used Photoshop before and you look at all the layer controls, don't you think it's kind of like a little bit of hit and miss, right? It's like, maybe I should use darken. No, it's not darken. How about multiply? There's all these different settings and blend modes, and we have these all here in Ecamm, but sometimes you're just kind of going, you know what? I'm just going to keep picking them until I find one that I like, or I just leave it alone. I'm sure that somebody who was the mathematical expert that came up with these blend modes knows exactly how to describe each and every one of them. I ain't that person. And so I'm the one that's just going around, and there's the, basically, there's all these different settings, and I'm kind of going, I'm just going to play around with it. I'll play around with it. So for instance, like, divide. Okay. Well, okay. So clearly what it's doing is it's dividing RGB values, those kinds of things. You have the difference, right? And then you've got exclusion and all these different things. I remember when I first started in graphics back in, I think it's right after Paul was, I think he turned 21 and I was just a baby. I started getting, no, I'm kidding. I was getting into computer graphics, and there were all these different ways to render your 3D scenes. And the thing about it was you had like Catmull and all these different types of rendering engines, and you're thinking to yourself, what is this? And it turns out that usually it's the name of the person who came up with the rendering engine algorithm. That's how they, it's like we name stars after people. Well, they named rendering engines after themselves. So that is a quick way to lay out a scene. Now, that's right. Reminds me of that scene. I think it was with Mel Brooks. I bring you these 15 commandments, and he drops a stone and says 10 commandments. It's the same thing. Okay, so we'll get rid of. I've had enough of two of me. It's too early to be seeing double. So going back to the user interface. If you go back to the user interface here, you see that it's, even though I have gotten rid of those elements, you can see here that they're still here. They're just hidden, right? And what Ecamm does is it doesn't actually delete things until you explicitly tell it to delete things, right? And that's good, right? Undo, redo works as well, of course, but at the same time, you sometimes might just want to hide something and not actually delete it. And that's what those Xboxes, sorry, I'll send the royalty check, Microsoft. You're going to, hit the, well, it is an X, it's a circle X. If you wanted to actually hide it, that's what that does. It hides the overlay. It doesn't actually delete it. If you want to delete it, you go over here and you click on any one of these items, and then you hit the little trash can, and then it goes away. Then it's officially gone. And you kind of want to keep this list tidy. And there's a reason for that. First of all, just from a sanity standpoint, I mean, you can have this window occupy, the entire screen if you want to, but at the end of the day, Ecamm does have some built-in organizational features that I think are worth talking about that help you kind of deal with things. So for instance, you see the imagine, create, repeat, there's an animation there, and then you got the circle, right? And you want to group those together. Really simple. You just want to group them together. So there's a little folder icon here, and I'll click to add that, and I'm going to call it a group. So I'm going to call this Ecamm animation. And Ecamm does a great job of automatically naming things for you, but like any other tool, any other graphic tool that you're using, you're going to be you're going to be so much better off in the long run if you actively or proactively rename your layers as you're creating them, or rename your overlays or your scenes, right? Those, pretty soon you're going to have copy of, and them which one's which. So, all right, so I've got Ecamm animation. Now, if I take the circle and I drag it in there, it's now inside that folder. And if I take the animation, drag it in there, it's also now inside that folder. But the order of these two does matter. So I can take, if I take the circle and put it above, where's the animation? Well, it's actually underneath the circle. It's still there. It's just not, you can't see it because it's not, it's behind, it's below it. So this layer system that works inside of Ecamm, this is very much a way to not only organize your scene, but it also is a way to order all of your elements. And it's much easier. It's just like, it's like layers in pretty much any other graphics design tool that you've ever worked in. So the cool thing about this, though, is that it usually what'll happen is if you click and drag, it'll just move that, right? And that's what you want. But what if you want to move the circle and the animation together? Well, at the top of every little group here is a little link. Looks like two chain links coming together. Link overlay group. So now they're linked together. So now what does that mean? Well, if I click and drag, it now drags both of them together. Super basic, super simple, but man, is it a time saver? If you've got a really cool series of overlays that are working together and you want to move them and treat them as a group, this is by far the easiest way to do it. And also it's really cool because the group itself can have its own show hide properties. These little eye icons that are right next to all the overlay names. If I click on that eye, you'll see that the entire overlay goes away. And if I turn it back on, it comes back. So everything that's inside of that folder will go on and off. And it makes it super easy to lay things out, hide things, show things. So you can build an entire scene and it starts out very simple, and then increasingly as you go through your presentation or through your show, you can add other elements, or you can step through elements too. For instance, if I wanted to, I could turn these off, but let's say as a group, the entire thing's off. Now, if I click the little eye icon next to the animation, that will hide it. So when I show the group, just that circle is back, and I actually have to go back in and turn on the animation again. So from an organizational standpoint and from just laying out things and grouping things, those are the best way to the groups are a great way to do this. And the cool part about groups, you can collapse them, You know, that's super important. It just makes this list that could get very unwieldy. You could just simplify it all down, and it makes it super, super easy to do. All right. So that is a quick scene layout. And let's see here. So sometimes I get questions about, you know, as far as like, what can I do with the camera? Or I'll get questions about what kind of camera do you use? Cameras can be anything. When you're using Ecamm, I mean, if it has a lens on it, you probably can use it in Ecamm. As long as it can connect to your computer, you're good to go. So in my case, if I'm on the road, I'll take this and I'll use this, and it works. It works fine. It's not ideal. It doesn't give me that kind of cool, blurry background action that I've got going on here, but it allows me to do Ecamm presentations much better than the built-in webcam that is in your Mac. I mean, let's just, for such a professional company, it's still a head scratcher to me why they don't have a better camera inside there. Let me see if I've got, my camera is locked. Why is that? Let me get that back. There we go. That is better. And so if you've, you know, for instance, like if I wanted to have, you know, with this camera, if I wanted to switch cameras, for instance, one way to do it would be to have a scene. And a scene has each different camera on it. And that's typically what I do. I'll just create if it's full screen, I'll do this, right? And then what I'll do is I'll go in and I'll create under full here, you see that this is the full. If I just go ahead and duplicate the full scene, now it says copy of full, and I'll call this my my Osmo, which I have sitting over here on the side of me. And now I'm actually, that scene is that scene is active now. So if I go to my Osmo and drag it in, and then now that's full, that's going to be full screen. Now I will get rid of all of this. I don't need any of this stuff, but you can see. All right. So another question I get is how you doing this? So this is probably a good time to talk about what my setup is here. And I want to stress that I have a serious issue with I probably should say this in a way that's not offensive, I guess is the right way, but they call it gear acquisition syndrome, which is it's called gas, right? So if you have gas, you'll be like me, and you'll be doing things in such a way where you just keep adding and adding and adding. And trust me, what you don't need is everything that I've got going on here. This is mainly because this is what I decided to do, and I went all in. And anybody that knows me, it's either go big or go home. So you can see I've got a monitor here. This is my Ecamm monitor. Over here is some other stuff going on, and I will talk about this guy, the activity monitor, and because I am seeing a lot of questions on Facebook about this, and I want to discuss this because I think it's a common issue. And then a little bit over here is another monitor that I can't even touch. I'm a arm's length away from it, but this is how I have everything set up. Right here is my teleprompter, and this is what I'm looking at right now. Down below is my monitor for the camera. So I'm using a Sony camera right now that's behind the teleprompter that I'm looking into. And this allows me to set all my settings in the camera. Again, this is extreme, folks. This is not something that you need to have in order to run Ecamm. This is if you start getting full on into it, this is where, you know, you may take things. And frankly, these monitors here, these are old Apple Thunderbolt monitors. These things they're old. I mean, they're like coming up on 15 years old. You can get them on Craigslist for a couple $100 and they still look amazing. I just put mine on mount so I can have them up at eye level instead of looking down at them. And then down a little bit lower here, I've got, this is my microphone, and then that guy there is my Rodecaster. And then this allows me to control my lights if I need to make any light adjustments. Oh, and then finally Stream Deck. See what I'm talking about here? This is where things get kind of nuts really quick. And I tend not to talk about this stuff at beginner level classes because it freaks people out. But this is everything that I'm doing is running on a Mac Mini that I got at Costco. I mean, it's like base level Mac Mini, 16 gigs of memory, and it works like a champ. I've had, once I figured out the secret formula for how to get the Mac to behave the certain way that you want it to, it's been perfect. It's been absolutely perfect. So, okay, so how do you remove from a default scene when it takes up my full canvas? Okay, so Clive, I've got your message up here. Let me pull that up and I'll put it down here. So how do I remove the camera source from a default scene? So this is actually, this is a great question because this comes up a lot. When you are using Ecamm, the default is to put your camera as the source for a new scene. And if anybody's watched any of Doc Rock's presentations on Ecamm, that's one of the first things he changes because it is by default, it goes to camera. But let me show you what I'm talking about here. If I go back into live demo mode and I take this full screen here or the full scene, and I'll duplicate this, right? So we're in this, right? And it just goes to your camera. But if you go to the source pull down menu and select blank, and assuming you don't have a camera overlay in there, right? This is what you'll get. And it's just blank. Now, why is it showing a background? Well, if you look here, you see there's the background image. Normally, if you don't have anything in show in background, if you don't have anything in there, it'll look like that. It'll be black. So this is what you can set it up in preferences actually. Let me pull up preferences here. Of course, preferences shows up in a monitor 3 feet away. All right. So if I go to preferences, and I believe it is in video. Yes. So you see here, default source mode, blank. It'll go, you can either set that to blank, camera, or your screen share. So I think that's one of the first things that a lot of us do is we go set it to blank. I think it defaults to camera. So that's how you do it. And then every time if you do put in a background, then the background will pop up in every scene, right? And so this is a great way. If you have a base background that you want to use in everything, you put it inside show and background. You can see here in overlays, you see show in all scenes, show in current scene, and then show in background. And show in background will be present in every single scene that you create, and show in all scenes will be also present. But you see the show in all scenes is at the top of the list, which means it will overlay everything on top of the existing scene that you have. So it goes show in all scenes, show in current scene, and then show in background, right? So this will be always your background. I hope that answers your question. If not, feel free to drop me another message and I'll be happy to answer. All right, we're going to pull that back up. let's see here. We'll talk about, excuse me, I'm going to talk about a few other things here. I'm still in live demo mode. I wanted to talk about this camera effects window. You can see, okay, first things first, we're already 40 minutes in. When you first launch Ecamm, don't freak out about all the windows that pop up. You can hide these windows and use them as you need them. As a matter of fact, you can see that this window here by default has see the elements that pop up when I mouse over into that window. If I hit the command tilde, that will actually show hide those for me. So these icons along the right hand side of your window pull up or hide the windows, these little smaller windows all around your scene. So in this case here, I've got the camera effects window, which is right here. So what is camera effects window? What's that good for? I don't have a green screen set up, but you could set up a blue screen, green screen here and use that and key off of that. So then you could also drag and drop an image into there. I've got a green screen in the closet somewhere, but I'm not gonna pull it out for this presentation. But it does work very well. Ecamm's algorithm for determining your green screen and the edges and whatnot does work very well. I would be careful about just lighting for a particular scene, because if it's poor lighting, the green screen won't work as well as if the screen is evenly and well lit. Zoom and pan. Now this is something that I do use quite a bit, and the reason is really simple. If I go back to the other scene that I created, let's see here, this scene here, and let's say I bring in a Zoom guest or an interview guest, and they are at a different height or different Zoom level than I am. I will have to go in and adjust zoom and pan for them. Now, since there's only me and me, if I'll just demonstrate real quickly. But what's really cool about this is that if I click on zoom and pan, you can see now I can zoom around. Now it's the same camera because I duplicated it, but you can see I can zoom in. So if somebody comes in, like, you know, it happens all the time. When you get somebody on Zoom or in interview mode, they're either lower than you or taller than you or bigger than you or smaller than you. You can use zoom and pan just on that camera to control where they are inside the frame. So you can kind of get it exactly where you want it. Not necessarily all the time, but you can get there. And I try my best. Usually when I'm doing my other show, I do a show called The Rainy Cajun, and we'll bring in guests, and they're often on their laptops, or they're often, you know, on some kind of camera alignment that is way out of alignment of what we are. So I have to sit there and adjust that. And I do that quite frequently, actually, and I'm doing it during the show, which is sometimes it gets a little distracting. So I use another mode in Ecamm to do it kind of in the background before anybody else sees it. So zoom and pan is really useful for that. It doesn't necessarily affect the picture quality so much. I mean, if you're streaming at 4K, you're not gonna see anything. If you're streaming at 720, you may start to see a little bit of fuzziness, a little bit of pixelation, but it's not that bad. Picture settings, brightness, temperature. Temperature is a big one. Now, if you're setting up your camera correctly, you're going to have everything balanced, right? Your white balance is going to be set. Your exposure is going to be set. Your aperture is going to be set. All of those things are already done and they're fixed. And again, that's why I go down like here. I'll just let's see if I can pull up my iPad mini here just to show you how I do it. And this is really cool about Ecamm. So I've got my iPad mini actually plugged into the Mac right now. And this, Well, I just replaced that. let's put it as a separate overlay. There we go. So you see, this is what I'm seeing on my iPad right now. So this is, you can see down below, almost down below. Let me see if I can set that to a 4:3. Yeah, that's a little bit better. So you see, here is my iPad, and I'm able to adjust my camera settings here. It's a little bit clipped. Let me see if I can zoom out. There we go. So this is the Sony monitor app that you can, if you have a Sony camera, you can use with a lot of the different Sony cameras. So here I can tap on my iris. I can change that. I can change my ISO. I can change my shutter angle, which is new. White balance is right here as well. I can plug through all my different white balances. So generally speaking, you won't make any adjustments to your camera settings when you're started your show. I mean, that's you've already got everything dialed in. But in the event that you don't, or somebody comes in and they are, let's get back to, there we go. And they come back and there's something that's off, their colors are off, they're using like this ultra like daylight, like nuclear explosion white, and you want to warm that up a little bit, you can use the temperature setting for that. And let's see, and then we got tint. You can tint towards magenta, you can tint towards green. Magenta and green are typical for lighting. So I've got these studio lights here that I'm using, and sometimes I'll do a white balance calculation on them. And as lights age, believe it or not, even the LEDs will start to tint either towards magenta or towards green. And you can counterbalance that using the tint function. But that's something that you would probably do in camera. You wouldn't necessarily do it inside of Ecamm. But again, these controls are here for quick adjustments. I would strongly recommend that if you're doing anything that requires major adjustments to your camera or calibrating your camera, do that all in what they call a tech check before your show actually begins. Saturation, same thing. Gamma settings. Now there is one other option here. You see this thing is called Select LUT, right there. What is that for? What is a LUT? It stands for lookup table. And this is something that if I go here, and I'll just go to my desktop, and the LUT Marshall uses. Marshall Fox is one of the other presenters on the Ecamm network. He has a LUT that he created, and there's a lot of ways to create your own LUTs. You can look those up on YouTube. There's plenty of ways to do it. He created one that he uses for his house, for his setup, and he tunes it. So why would you do this? Well, let's say you got your camera dialed in exactly like you want it, but you want to enhance certain colors. Unlike a filter, which you would have on like Instagram or something like that, where it's actually filtering everything, the LUT will actually pick out certain color values and adjust just those color values. So shadows may remain intact, or you can adjust those shadows or highlights or those kinds of things. So it's selective in the way that it manipulates the color. So for instance, here, look, so I just put that on and look what it does. It completely changed what's going on behind me. And I look like I just stepped out of Miami. So you can dial in that LUT and you can go with whatever, settings you want. So if this little slider guy here is exactly what that's for. You can make those adjustments. That's it. I'm not going to use that one, but it's fun. And you can get LUTs all over the place. Like I said, you can make your own, but it is definitely it's a useful tool to have. Usually you use it in cameras to control your color grading. And again, that's something that goes well beyond what this particular presentation is, but you can certainly pull up LUTs and play with them. And a lot of them are free out there. So just, if you want to, if you're going for a certain look, especially if it's like a holiday or some kind of event where you want to look a little silly without making major adjustments to the lighting in your studio, absolutely do it. Or you're in a place where the lighting is terrible and you want to be able to dial in your own settings. You can absolutely do that with a LUT and create richer colors even off of a bad scene. Some of the other options inside the camera effects, you can mirror, black and white if you want to go that way. You can do sepia if you want, and then a blur. And the blur is okay. So this is obviously not very useful, right? I mean, you can hear my voice, but you can't see anything. So you can dial this in, but again, this doesn't have a ton of usefulness because it applies globally to the entire camera. However, remember the shape overlays that we were creating, something you can do, if I create a new shape overlay and I set this fill from gradient to blur, now anything that appears behind that overlay is now blurred, and just that. Everything else outside of that is normal. So this is to me, this is a much more effective use of blur than to apply it globally to the entire camera. And there's also, you can do, there's some other ones here. You could pixelate it, right? And you can really dial up that pixelation if you want. So if you're interviewing somebody that's in the witness protection program, you can absolutely do it this way just by placing a shape object with a certain type of filter on it. All right. And then there's de-interlace, and honestly, I don't use de-interlace. I don't know if de-interlace really applies that much anymore, because then that means you're usually working with older NTSC signal equipment, and I don't think most people who are doing live streaming or even recorded streams are dealing with interlaced images. Interlaced, like if you had 1080i, the I stands for interlaced. 1080p stands for progressive, which means, going back to NTSC standards, it updates, instead of the way that they used to do it is that every other line would be updated. That was called interlacing, and then it would go back and refresh the next set. Progressive, it just does it all at once. So anyway, that's all. That's a history lesson. We don't need to do that. That's Paul's job anyway, do history lessons. Make sure to chisel that one down, would you, Paul? Okay, let's see. I'm going to go through the comments here and see if I see anything. Yeah, so yeah, the web overlays. Sorry. Yeah, hey, Roy. I'm looking through the comments right now because I took off the Q filter. Mark's here. Mark's in the house, of course. Yeah, so like Matt said here, his M1 Mac Mini, it's fine. Oh yeah, so that was one of the things I wanted to talk about was before we I wanted to make sure that we discuss this, because again, this is something that I feel like is coming up consistently. And I'll go back to my new scene here and I'll get rid of you. No, not edit you. Get rid of you. And I'll do actually an app screen share here. So let's turn off our Ecamm animation, size me down. And then I will do screen share, and I'm going to change this to, it says it, primary display, secondary display, tertiary display, quaternary display. Okay, sure. Yeah, all that off of Mac Mini. Can you believe it? Activity monitor. This is what I wanted to show. So this is, let me go back to get out of live demo mode here. This is something that I think is really important for people to see. You can see that with Activity Monitor right now, I've got my physical memory, which is showing 16 gigabytes, and then I'm using 14 and a third ish, and I've actually swapped to the hard drive a little bit. This is where, not your CPU. Your CPU does play a role, but you see my CPU usage right now, close to 40% is idle. My memory usage is that's what can kill Ecamm. And it's not Ecamm's fault. What you're trying to do inside of Ecamm is something that is, people used to pay hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars for to get their, these systems set up. I was recently talking with some folks at the New Orleans Saints about their setup in the control room at the Superdome, and they were talking about the equipment that they were using, and it's insane. It's insane. I mean, there are multiple RTX boards, NVIDIA RTX boards, real-time rendering. I mean, just crazy, right? Your Mac is not going to be able to do that. And your Mac also costs a fraction of what some of these, these systems will do, but you can still do an incredible amount. But the thing you have to be careful of always is your memory utilization. And that, I mean, I never used to keep Activity Monitor up. It is up 24/7 on my computer. And anytime I see this, this graph with the green, whenever I see that going into yellow, I know that I need to start closing some apps. You can see here, for instance, right now, Ecamm's occupying 1.5 gigs of memory, right? And then I've got Chrome running, and Chrome is a huge memory sucker. And this is nothing. 700 megs, that's nothing for Chrome. I've seen it in the multi gigabytes, right? Just depends on what you're doing with Chrome. So you have to be super careful of that. The other thing, let's see, Camo Studio. Camo I've got running because I'm using it with the DJI, the Pocket 3, and then I've got my light controllers, and everything else is pretty much, it's fine. Windows Server, by the way, this thing is, the only way to reset Windows Server is to restart the machine. That's just because that's a system level process. So you don't want to, if you see that, I mean, it's occupying almost 6 gigabytes right now. So fully a third of my available memory is going to the that Windows Server process. So it's always good to, it's always good if you're going to do a show that involves multiple apps running at the same time. I try to minimize that, right? I try to keep the number of open apps that I've got going on down to a minimum when I'm doing a show, just to give Ecamm as much breathing room as possible. Primary reason for that is that there are, when you start using your hard drive as memory, and even if it's an SSD, it's still slower than the physical memory that's on your computer. So as soon as it starts swapping to that SSD, your computer performance will drop. And so you want to try and avoid that. Now, my swap says swap uses, it's holding steady, which means it's not using it right now, especially since I have available space in memory. But I don't even bother with the CPU tab, because the M series of Macs, Apple's done an incredible job engineering these so that they utilize only what's necessary in terms of system performance or process, and it'll constantly swap out things, prioritize certain tasks over others depending upon the need. It does that great. Memory is just where it gets you. So if you can start with at least 16 gigs of memory, I would do that. And then, and this is in hindsight now, but I would probably not advise most of my new customers to do anything less than 32 gigs. And you just again, for breathing room more than anything else. Because if you've got a bunch of apps open, like I've run Keynote at the same time, and man, that just, it just kills you would think an Apple product would run efficiently inside Mac OS. It doesn't. And then you're trying to render slides inside of Ecamm. It can be a challenge. Also, people will often say, well, Ecamm's, they're doing things, they'll say things like, Ecamm is got like I'm sorry, I'm getting out of live demo mode here. They'll say things like, my camera's stuttering, and it's like, okay, well, how's your camera connected? What type of camera is it? When the moderators and the people that are asking questions in like Facebook or Discord for Ecamm, they're asking those questions because that is where you start tracing where the particular problem is. Like right now, I'm running at 4K through a Mac Mini, right out to the internet. I've got what is this? This is a 1080p DJI camera, and then I've got a Link camera from Insta360 up here, and they're both connected as well. So they're all using system resources and they work, but I've tested them, and I've hooked up 4 Link cameras running at 4K on this Mac Mini, and it kills it. It kills it. Last thing about the system, and I don't work for Apple, and I don't get paid by Apple for recommending buying the latest and greatest, and I don't recommend necessarily the latest and greatest. As Matt pointed out, he has an M1 and it works fine. M4s will be coming pretty soon, and I don't think you need them. I mean, honestly, I don't think you need them. I've been rocking this M2 now for well over a year, and it works great. And if you can get it cheap, then the only thing I would say is get it with as much memory as you can afford. And even the hard drive space doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, because you can always buy external Thunderbolt SSDs and connect them up, and it works perfectly. I mean, you just the head unit, I guess, that is, yeah, shutter angle is awesome. You're gonna find that you'll get the most bang for your best place to go. Refurbished store on Apple, best place. I mean, go for the refurbs there. I've bought dozens of computers from Apple that way. And it's not the latest and greatest, but they work and they're warranted, and that it just, it saves you a ton of money. And the M series chips they're perfect for that stuff. All right, let me see if I can go through a few. Yes. Blurs, great. It's protecting. Yes. Okay, people are laughing. Probably my comments. Yes, and as Mr. Moderator correctly points out, Chrome will kill your system performance with the more tabs you have open. So I have begrudgingly trained myself to not have more than, when the tabs start compressing, right? When they start getting smaller and smaller and you can't read what's on the tab, that's when I stop. That's when I start closing tabs. There's a way around that. You just drag a tab and you move it over and create a new window. But, that's, you're going to run into problems anyway. Okay, so I don't see any more questions, and we're right about time. But, of course, I did want to talk about something that was just announced this week, and this is from the Ecamm folks. Let's pull this up here. This is the Content Launchpad. Hey, if you want to have your own show and have people that know what they're doing make it for you and bring it to life, this is the next contest that you absolutely want to be part of. This is you. I wish I would have had this a year ago. It's so awesome. And so you've got they do the production, they will do the branding and everything for you. I mean, really, you show up with an idea and a personality and content, Ecamm's going to help you bring it to life. I mean, I can't think of any better program than something like this. And the only thing is you gotta write a written proposal and you got to do a video proposal. So if you haven't done that yet, get comfy on camera. It's going to be a requirement, because if you're the one that's going on there, then you got to make sure you're comfy behind that camera. Also, there are some restrictions. Sorry, Rhode Island, you can't participate. So if you want to participate, move away from Rhode Island. Also, if there's no, controversial shows, no political shows, no religious shows, anything that could cause community issues, where the Ecamm is not going to allow. But other than that, you are free to create whatever you want. And again, I can't think of a better program than having something like that available to you. So that I think I'm going to do it. I think we're done. If there's no more questions in the chat, Tatiana, thank you very much. I appreciate you dropping in. This was fun. This was an interesting. Sorry. Yes, you must be a resident in the United States. So for those of you in the UK, many apologies, but that's maybe sometime in the future. You never know. It's just that all these different laws, and for some reason I don't know why Rhode Island decided not to play ball, but they did. So that's the way it is. But if there's no more questions, we'll go ahead and wrap it for today. We have we've got Ecamm and Espanol coming up. And then, of course, Mr. Camera Junkie is going to be on tomorrow night. If you don't, and he's in the chat here. He's always saying upgrade your skills before your gear, and he's always talking about both. And I think it's a great show. It's one of my highlights of a Saturday night. And I don't know if that's indicative of who he is or who I am, but regardless, it's a good show to watch. And then we've got the stream show coming on a Sunday evening. And unfortunately, I never watch those shows during football season because it's football season. So other than that, then we'll be right back into the regular schedule. So make sure to check in, and let's see what we got here, Mr. Moderator. Okay, and we are good to go. So thank you so much for joining me. I wish you guys the best weekend possible, and thanks for the family to stop in and say hi. Really appreciate it. So everybody have a great weekend, and if you're catching us on the replay, be sure to check out all the other shows that Ecamm has going on. And we'll go ahead and wrap it up here. I'll give you guys a chance to chat a little bit, and I am out. So you guys take care of yourselves, all right? See you later.
Come straight out of Ecamm. This is a jam for the Ecamm fam. Ecamm fam is the name of the jam. This is a jam for the Ecamm fam. Ecamm fam is the name of the jam. This is a jam for the Ecamm fam. Coming straight out of Ecamm. Ecamm fam. This is a jam for the Ecamm fam. Ecamm fam is the name of the sham.